do it for that, right?
For your health. I think
Do
it's a
it for
health
your
move.
health. Do it for your health.
Mental, physical,
Yes.
spiritual health.
Because all three of those will be impacted if you start doing these things. And I think my main thing is always you don't have to have tons of land to do these things, which is a huge misnomer. Hi, friend. This is Annette.
This is Jared.
And welcome to our Happy Family podcast.
We're passionate about happy, healthy relationships.
And that only happens with happy, healthy people.
So join us each week as we discuss the ingredients of making your own happy family.
Thanks for joining us. Let's jump in. Hello, Farmily, and welcome back to another episode of the Happy Farmily podcast, hosted by myself and Jared. Hi, Jared.
Howdy, y'all.
How are you?
Great.
I'm going to tell you something that just happened right before we started recording.
Let's do this.
Yeah, let me tell you. So I was in the house, and we were going to record the podcast, so I was like, okay, well, let me try to fix myself up, whatever that means. I actually really don't care because I show myself quite frumpy on Instagram all the time. But I thought, well, maybe I shall make an effort since now we are recording all these podcasts. So I did that, and I was like, I didn't really do my hair today. Let me put a hat on. Let me go find my favorite hat that I wear all the time. I only wear one hat. It's a Tractor Supply hat. So I go in the laundry room, which I just this week, which I just this week went through the laundry room and cleaned everything, and I was so excited. And I went to that spot where I'm putting my hats, and it's not there. And I'm like, well, what in the world? I'm like, okay, forget it. I don't have time to find this hat. It's not in the cart. Fine, whatever. I walk into the Jared's office to record, and who is wearing my hat? Jared's wearing my hat.
Loving it.
Mm-hmm. Did you steal it from my spot?
That is exactly what I did.
I was like, come on. I mean, you do look pretty cute in it, so we're gonna let it slide this once.
Thank you.
But
I'll take it.
We do like this hat. We wear it all the time. I don't know why, but yeah.
My
so,
turn.
anyways, it's kind of gross. It's like sharing. It's like, are we sharing like
What?
hair germs?
What? Get out of here.
I don't know. Anyways.
Oh man, I'm kicking your tripod. Sorry.
Okay, we're on a roll. But
All right.
I have a story for you about when Jared and I were going to when we first got betrothed. Oh, doesn't that sound fun?
Yeah, that's fancy. Here we go.
Betrothed.
I want to hear this story.
Okay. We got betrothed, and we decided, where do we want to live as newlywed youngins?
Wow. This is amazing.
Starting our
Tell this
life
story.
together.
Yes.
We want to live in downtown Atlanta, in the tallest building, surrounded by shops and frenzy
Yes,
things.
that's what we wanted.
That's what we wanted, right?
Mm-hmm.
That is what we decided when we first got engaged and we were deciding what to do with our lives. There was this area in Atlanta called Atlantic Station, which basically 20 years ago was being built. I feel old. And it was like the up and coming area, right? It was going to have lofts above in the high part of the building, and underneath was shops. There was like all the stores, whatever, Express, Gap, the Banana Republic, all that stuff.
Restaurants, shows. I mean, it was the place.
Shows, like a gym. There was a grocery store all within like a block. It was like the place, right? And we thought we needed to be there. So we put a deposit down. I don't even know, honestly, how we came up with the deposit, because it was like both of our life savings at the time. And we put a deposit down for this.
And hold on, I got to add a detail. And this was the time when they were like, what do you think you'll make next year?
Oh, yeah. We were like,
oh yeah, so we can afford this. And we just puked out numbers. And they were like, oh yeah, great. Just sign
I was like, I'm going to travel nurse.
Stated income.
Yeah. For those that don't know, I was a nurse at the time. So I was going to do travel nursing, and they pay you pretty good. I mean, they do. So I thought I was going to do that. So yeah, we can afford this. It was expensive. I don't even know what we were thinking, to be quite honest. We're like 23, 25 years old. Okay.
The male brain hasn't fully formed.
We put a deposit down, and there we went. Like, it was like the start of my senior year, I think, in college. You were already out in the working world. And as the time got closer to when we were going to have to move in and do all the things, we were feeling like a little like,
Hmm.
maybe, maybe,
Hmm.
why didn't our parents tell us not to
Forbid
do
us.
this?
They
Now
were
I look
like
back and
so
I'm like, they were
supportive.
like, yeah. And I'm like, no, 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 no,
Fun.
no. Someone should have said, you're out of your mind.
Yeah.
This is a terrible idea.
Those are words that my dad didn't have those in his vocabulary. You're out of your mind. It was always, oh, you can do this.
Yeah. So, yeah. Financially, I think as we were getting close to it, we were thinking, how are we going to pay for this thing per month?
And are we going to like this little 900 square foot loft?
Yeah, it was small, which there's nothing wrong with 900 square feet, but for being, it was going to be small. And let me just give you the visual how if you go get groceries, it was the kind where you had to take them up an elevator, upstairs,
You're
like.
describing most of the world, by the way.
But I'm just saying,
Yeah.
I'm just expressing. It was in
Yes.
a building way up high, all these things we had not done before is
That
what
is
I'm
for
trying to
sure.
say. It was
That
going to
is
be a
true.
complete change, but we
Yeah.
thought we were going to be hip and cool and
Hip
be
and cool.
downtown, which is fine. But financially, it would have been a stretch.
Yep.
So it's not something we could back out of. We could have backed out, but we would have lost our deposit, which was hefty. So we were moving forward.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't even know how long before. Do you remember how long before it was when
It was like a month and a half.
pretty close to.
Yeah.
We got notice that there was a roof.
There was some praying going on here.
We were praying a lot. There was a roof leak that had caused a lot of damage to the loft right before it was almost ready. And because of it, it was going to delay months, or like it would be months before we could move in. And they were giving people the option to opt out of their contracts and get their deposit back. And that was like heaven had opened, and the light had shone like straight down.
Literally.
And it was like, do that. And
Do that.
so we backed out of it and did that. And it's just so interesting because, that was literally 19 years ago, basically, when we first started the process of trying to think that this is what we wanted, this is what we were going to do. And then basically 10 years after that, we were doing the complete opposite.
Yeah, well,
and planning on changing our lives into a complete other direction.
Yeah. And it's funny because at that time, this loft we had picked had a view of all of Atlanta. It's like,
which was very cool.
This is beautiful.
Yeah.
And then there are multiple buildings now in front of that loft. You would be staring 30 feet away into a glass office space.
Basically, we would have been there for like 2 years with a view, and then we would have had no view. And to be quite honest, now that I look back on it, I feel like it was God that gave us the sign to not move there. I think Jared and I would have been in a world of hurt. Well, financially for sure, but I think our marriage would have truly suffered. I think there would have been a lot of issues had we been in that situation. And so I'm glad we were not. And it's funny how then, like 10 years later, we find ourselves in the suburbs of Atlanta because we moved into like the little ways out, but in a neighborhood. And we've then found ourselves saying, we actually think we need to move
the opposite
further out and actually maybe move into the country, which was a total different mindset.
Totally different.
Which I think now is such it's a trend for sure. I had somebody reach out to me last week and said, hey, would you be interested in being featured in Architectural Digest for an article that we're working on talking about the trend of people moving out of the city into the country? And I was like, oh yeah, sure. That sounds fun. But it's just interesting that more and more that is something that's being considered a thing and is being written on, because during COVID, it was like the thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
I looked up.
A lot during COVID. I was looking up some stuff and it said during COVID, just so many people.
Yeah. I read something like 2 million, it's estimated maybe in America, like 2 million people moved from a large city out into a more country or, kind of thing. And it's interesting to think that what is now trendy
Mm-hmm.
is something that was life, what, 100 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
7,500 years ago. And now we're acting like it's like this kind of, I don't know, it's just funny.
Like it's this
How the
trendy thing.
times, like just how the times change and how things develop. But why did we move out? What was your initial like thought as to why we decided like let's move out into the country?
I mean, it was learning things in the 2008 crisis where it's like, oh my word, it's the end of the world.
Mm-hmm.
You're living downtown somewhere, like you're
stuck.
You're stuck and out of luck.
If you've seen any of the movies, a lot of them are from like years back, but just when something happens or there's a crisis or like, oh, the aliens take over or I don't know, like all these things happen, it's always everyone like fights in the city. Everyone
right.
fights and everyone is fighting for food, fighting for space, fighting for like everything. And I'm like, I don't want to be stuck in a city. I don't want to be stuck in a city and I don't want to be unable to provide for myself or know how to, I guess, is what we thought, right?
Yeah, I mean, we were pretty alarmed at first. Yeah. Like, cities are unsustainable. Every single thing is controlled. You own nothing. So I mean, let's be honest. There was a little fear and terror.
If I were to now recommend, I would say you should not move somewhere out of fear of something. I don't think that is a smart thing to do.
Well, and at first, like as we're looking for property, it's like, how far out can I drive? How far out in the middle of nowhere can I be?
Yeah.
And it was quite like depressing.
And that's a temptation.
Man.
That's a temptation.
Yeah, that's a temptation. Yeah. It's like for your own preservation. And then it's like, I mean, can I? But then you're like, wow, but the city has like fast food and Uber Eats and you can have it delivered.
Which is so nice.
So nice.
So nice. Nothing wrong with that.
Let's not lie. The luxury of Annette getting groceries delivered to her house has changed Annette's life.
Yes.
Who'd have thought that would happen here in the old countryside?
Can happen. Yeah, no, it's because people are moving closer. We're not as country anymore, folks. But there are some very nice things that you might not get if you move way out into the middle of nowhere.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
So I mean, I think we wanted to use this episode to talk about there are some amazing, awesome things about living downtown in a city. Mm. All the conveniences, all the luxuries, and assuming honest, pure-hearted people are in control of society, cities are great. I mean, the Bible literally says everyone during this 1,000 years or whatever is going to live in the heavenly city.
Yeah.
Hey, happiness goes with the city life. But in a context when the world is not all roses and peaches, mm-hmm. and I think we saw this through COVID, mm-hmm. where you see like people in China locked in their houses,
like you really
locked in their apartments, and we're in our backyard, la la la, mm-hmm. as if nothing's going on. Like to me, that was the ultimate. Like, oh, I get it. I get why.
I feel like that's when it was most real to me because we had lived out here for 5 years before COVID hit. And so for us, it was a way of life. It was nothing new, nothing trendy. It was just something we had done. However, I felt the most validated in living out in the country when that happened because I didn't feel a difference. And what was wild is at the time I was working at the hospital still a few days a week. So I would drive into the city to go to the hospital and work. And it was like I was living in this weird dimension, being at work, seeing everything. And it was just wild. And then I'd come home and it'd be like, well, I got my animals, I got my garden, all these things. And I think a lot of people found that peace and found that joy that I really believe you get just by going outside and getting your hands in the soil and doing those things that I think that's why you should move out into the country or try to at least live a more self-sustaining life because it was, people were doing those things even in their backyard, but they were reaping the benefit. Mm-hmm. So it was like all of a sudden like, oh, wow, I don't have to be indoors, watching TV all the time, or I don't have to go to shopping or things. I can actually find joy and contentment being in my backyard tending to plants. And it's pretty cool.
Yeah, and I think, as it relates with work, I think it's just so easy these days to be involved with work where you're just staring through a screen like it's a window all day, meeting with people digitally, and even with the new Vision Pro from Apple, like it's just going to continue to foster this digital world when I think for guys, we need fulfillment.
Mm-hmm.
What did I do today that I can see a difference being made? And I think, if it's no more than I cleaned this or I let the animals in or I did this, there's some fulfillment of a tangible nature of something you did where the temptation in his life is, I just want to be lazy, laying on a beach, sipping margaritas, playing on my phone. After a few days of that, and after a few years in the rat race of life of this, there's an angst of, I don't feel fulfilled.
Right. I remember that years ago I'd heard a TED talk, and it was specifically talking about men and how the satisfaction in the workplace was so low because it is that day-to-day grind of the same thing every day, and you don't see progression forward. So you might be, making good things in your work, or you might be finishing tasks, but you're not really seeing basically something tangible as a result of the 8 hours a day you spend, at a desk doing something versus when people were farmers, men, let's pick on men because let's say men mostly were farmers back in the day. It is something where you can tell the difference from 1 day to 3 days later on a plant you have planted, or if you've harvested something, or like if you've raised animals. I mean, there's things there. And it's just saying how that brought so much more satisfaction. And nowadays, the jobs that we have for the most part don't have that. And it's just pretty, like it's crazy. But I would say it applies to more than just men now. I mean, it applies to a lot of women too in their jobs. You don't have that kind of, I don't know, maybe satisfaction of doing something every day that's fulfilling in that way.
And satisfying.
Yeah. I think for us, it started off as like, oh dear, there's an economic crash. And it was 2008. We started the idea of we are going to move, and it took us, because I'm grateful we didn't flee.
Yeah.
Right. Because I think if we would have done that, we would have done it for the wrong reasons, and we would have gotten disheartened, I think, quick. And who knows, maybe not made it and wanted to move back. But I think because we were really trying to find the right property, something we could afford, something we could do, it took us
7 years.
7 years, to find our property now. And I think to me that would be my biggest advice to anyone who is thinking, I want to do something. It would be, do something. Don't not, but don't do it out of fear.
That's right.
Please don't do it because the government is going to, like, the government thing is a big trend. And I might get in hot water for saying this because I feel like in the homesteading world, a lot of times it's anti-government. Like, I want to move, I want to be away because the government's doing all these things. And while there's a lot of truth to those things, and there can be probably both sides to that equation, that shouldn't be the reason you try to move somewhere, is because you're running away from the establishment and trying to like fend for yourself. I think at some point you have to want to do it out of bettering yourself and not just running away from something.
Yeah, I think that's very healthy. One of my favorite memes I've ever seen is along the lines of, I'm stockpiling weapons against the government whose flag I'm mad at you for not saluting.
Oh, interesting. So it's like,
It's like, and you have those sentiments, and America has stood for these values. And I think people are frustrated, rightfully so, at all sides of the political spectrum. But the idea of living off the land is much older than America.
Correct.
Much more sustainable than any other practice or anything.
Yes.
And, now we're starting to learn the science of emotional benefits, reversal of depression by getting your hands in the soil.
Just being outside.
Being outside.
Like
The sun exposure hitting your eyes without sunglasses on. And all this crunchy stuff.
Yeah.
That's now, oh, and the biggest being produce coming from your backyard with that short distance is loaded with vitamins, nutrients, minerals,
And it tastes better.
and it tastes better.
Yeah.
But that if it came 3 weeks away from California, you don't get those. The taste, the benefit, the
So
nutrients.
it's like, if anything, do it for that, right?
For your health. I think
Do
it's a
it for
health
your
move.
health. Do it for your health.
Mental, physical,
Yes.
spiritual health.
Because all three of those will be impacted if you start doing these things. And I think my main thing is always, you don't have to have tons of land to do these things, which is a huge misnomer. I have people message me on Instagram pretty often where, I can't wait. We're just looking for land. Do you think 5 acres is enough? And I'm like, 5 acres is plenty enough. You can do stuff on 1 acre. You would be shocked at the amount of people that grow food to feed like hundreds of people on 1 acre of land because they learned how to maximize their space. So there's ways to do these things. You can grow food in your backyard. I remember when we spoke at the Homestead Festival, which is a festival in Tennessee, 2 years ago, I had this family come up to me and tell me how gardening had changed their life. And it changed their life because their daughter had been diagnosed with leukemia. And when they realized that, food was so deficient of nutrients and all these things, they said, we're going to grow our own food. And this was during COVID. And they were in a neighborhood in a cul-de-sac, and they started their own little garden in the backyard. And it was enough to have all these fresh fruits, like veggies mostly. They were making fresh things for their daughter. They felt like they were giving her the most optimal nutrition they could. And this is while being in a cul-de-sac in a neighborhood. They got their neighbors inspired to garden because the neighbors saw what they were doing, and they all started gardening, and it became like a little garden club.
That's awesome.
And they didn't need a lot of land. And the daughter did get better, which was really cool. She got better through all her cancer treatment and leukemia and everything. But I just think that's so cool. So if anything, if you've thought of, why is there the trend? Why is there the thing? It's just so good for you.
Mm-hmm.
It's just, I think it'll also, there's so many things. It's kind of like maybe like a domino effect, that one thing will do another thing, and it just kind of starts this whole maybe new path for your life. I think it's better for your family. If you have kids, I think it'll be better for your kids to learn how to be more self-sufficient and do some of these things. There's just, so it doesn't have to just be like a trend. It can be something that just becomes your life, where we get back to the basics. I think we've always said we're trying to get back to the basics. Mm-hmm. That's why we started this whole thing.
I talked to someone recently and talking about how much land you need. He's like, we have an acre. We take it to a farmer's market in the city, that's a pretty big city near them. Mm-hmm. And he said, we make about $125,000 a year.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Between flowers, herbs. I'm just like, that's amazing.
Yeah.
I know somebody else, similar story.
Yeah.
An acre.
Yeah.
But it is well thought out, well planned,
sure.
Always going.
Sure.
So yeah, to anyone that thinks you need lots of land, you don't.
You don't. And actually, on your point of saying that, I do want to say something where you can make a living off gardening or homesteading. But I personally feel like I don't recommend, if you want to move out and do something different, I don't recommend you just quit everything and hope that you're going to be able to do that, like garden, sustain yourself, or raise animals and sell them and sustain yourself or something. It's not easy. And you have to be like very committed. It takes a lot of hard work. You don't get days off. Like you don't get days off. Mm-hmm. And so I think it's always best if there's a way where you can still work. For me, I was still working at the hospital. I was still driving an hour plus to work and coming back. But honestly, on my days off, I was so happy to be here versus where we were before, that I was okay with the commute, right? So have a plan for yourself, because I think that will help you not get discouraged. So not moving out for the wrong reasons, I think, is one. And then having a financial plan in place, it will also help you.
Yeah, I think it's true. I was going to say something that's just a peace of mind thing. I remember, I think it was probably a little bit before COVID, maybe a little in COVID, but I did a lot of international travel there for a few years. And I mean, I remember this one time I'm sitting in Bangalore, India, for like 3 hours and just bumper to bumper, just noise, like all this sounds of noise. And then you're on like multiple 12-hour flights home, land in Atlanta, you go through customs and then drive. We're about an hour from the airport. And then I pull in home and it's like perfect sky, stars. I'm just like, this is surreal.
Yeah.
This is like, yeah, wow. Surreal.
It's a sense of peace, I think.
Definitely.
Which I think because in the normal world, what is promoted so much is more and more and more. And, our attention span is literally like, I think 1 point something seconds where
Yeah.
the screen has to be changing, images that often for you to be able to pay attention and all these things. When you're out in nature more, it's like your vision starts to change. There's a book called now I'm going to forget. It's something country living, but it's from a man that lived in England, and he wrote this book in the mid 18 like early 1900s, 1920s. And he lived in England, and he talked about how there was so much pollution back then. The fog literally felt like something that was engulfing him all the time. He was completely depressed. He was very unhealthy. His children were sick. His marriage was falling apart. And back then, this is 100 years ago, he decided, we're going to move out into the country. So they moved out into the English countryside, found what now sounds like a dream, a cottage with the whole thing, started fixing things up. And he said that at first it was so hard, but then he said he felt like someone had taken, he had like dark shades on or sunglasses, and it felt like someone had literally taken his sunglasses off, and he had this new vision for life where he had never realized there was different sounds to birds.
That's awesome.
He had never realized that there could be so many different flowers and smells and just the sounds that you hear and water. And he said it literally healed me and saved my life and changed my marriage. It's a very cool book. I'll look it up. Maybe we should put it in the show notes. I need to remember that because it's just this very old book by this man who literally journals his progress from the city into the country and how he felt it was so life-giving. But I loved that thought of, because it's true, sometimes when you're so caught up in the daily rat race, you don't take enough time to appreciate very simple things.
Right.
And once you can be out in nature a little more and see that, just the leaves changing colors, I don't know, there's just all these things from the seasons and all that that's so life-giving, where you prefer that over, whatever else you used to prefer.
Yeah.
And it's just cool.
I agree. To anyone considering it, I can't say enough about you should do it.
So if you think it's trendy, trends come and go, right? So maybe in a year or so, everyone's going to say you should move into the city. It's better. Some people say that, like it's less commuting, right? Like you don't have to spend as much, whatever. Oh, there's all these things. But know that I think living in the country never has to be trendy. It's just the thing.
The thing.
It doesn't have to be a trend.
Especially if you're a believer in that story of we were made to be naked gardeners.
No. I think if you're referring to Adam and Eve.
What? Who said anything about Adam and Eve?
I think you couldn't tell they were naked.
Okay.
If you were out there naked gardening, people would know.
Starting the trend again.
Okay. I'm sure that exists somewhere in this world. I'm sure there's like people that do that. I'll let you, I'll let you do that.
I'll pick it up.
I'll let you pick that up. Oh, wouldn't that be fun to be known as that? Oh, they're the ones. Oh, she's the one married to that naked gardener guy.
That's right.
Well, if you are thinking about it or homesteading, sometimes that word might have a negative connotation to some.
No, I heard the definition this week.
No? What's the latest?
This guy being interviewed by Brene Brown.
Oh, yeah?
She asked him, well, what's the difference between a farmer and a homesteader?
Yeah.
He goes, oh, farmers do stuff for other people.
Uh-huh.
homesteaders, it's all for ourselves. We don't sell any. I thought
It's like more self.
it's a
You're just
sustaining thing rather
yourself.
than a
Yeah.
we have so much that we
Yeah.
sell. So yeah,
But I think sometimes the word people don't know what it means. It
it's
sounds too
intimidating.
intense.
Like, oh, where's
So
your dairy cow?
yeah, like you have to be basically up at 5 a.m. You milk the cow, you milk the goats, you the whole thing.
Yeah.
So if it sounds intimidating to you, forget that word. I like to call it country living. I have a book I just wrote called Simple Country Living. It kind of runs through a lot of these things you can start doing to
That's
live
right.
this kind of lifestyle. Cottage core, that's another one people use, cottage core aesthetic. Have you heard of that?
No.
It's like another word for it. You do you. I'll
Okay.
just say that. You do you.
I'll be a naked gardener. Thank you for the permission.
Call it whatever you want. But just do it. You
All
won't
right.
regret. It's early in the year still. You won't regret doing something different and getting outside. So I'll leave it at that. And
See you next time.
hopefully Jared does not garden naked. But until next time, we'll be back.